thank you, Gary, for the wonderful gifts that you give to this congregation each time you play. Our opening words this morning were written by Thich Nhat Hanh. Every morning when we wake up, we have 24 more hours in which to live. What a precious gift. We have the capacity to live in such a way that those 24 hours will bring peace, joy, and wonder to us and everyone we know. Peace is present right here, right now, in ourselves and everything we do and see. The question is whether or not we are in touch with it. We don't have to travel far to enjoy the blue sky. We don't have to leave our city or even our neighborhood to enjoy the eyes of a beautiful child. Even the air we breathe can be a source of joy. We can smile, breathe, walk, and eat our meals in a way that allows us to be in touch with the abundance of happiness that is available. We are very good at preparing to live, but not very good at living. We know how to sacrifice 10 years for a diploma. We know how to give lots of hard work to get a job, a car, a house, and so on. But we have difficulty remembering that we are alive in the present moment, the only moment there is for us to live. Please rise in body or spirit to sing our opening hymn, number 203, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. We'll sing all 5 verses. As Molly Brady comes forward to light our chalice, please hear our opening words, written by Crystal Hogan. In the presence of this fire, we hear the voice of our God, of our goddess, of our holy, saying, "You are on sacred ground." In the presence of the flame, in me, in you, in us, moving, resting, gathering, we are on sacred ground. In the presence of this fire, we are compelled to take up a torch, to carry a flame, to seek sacred ground. In the presence of this spark, we are committed to light the fire of passion, of life, of holy work, the journey towards truth on sacred ground. Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service of Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church. Whatever path brought you here, we are glad to see you. We offer a special welcome to those who are visiting our church for the first time. This is a church where we ask you to know us by our deeds and not our creeds. We hope first-time visitors will stop by the welcome table at the entryway and pick up some information about this church and about Unitarian Universalism. If you're interested in membership, please look for people who have some yellow on their name tag. And the yellow says, "New? Ask me." So it's yellow on the name tag if you would like to know more. If you're interested in membership, you might be able to find the membership chairperson, Julie Smithers, who has the yellow on her name tag. Feel free to reach out, and we'll be glad to talk with you. We invite our guests, along with the congregation, to have fellowship and refreshments with us after the service. Please just go down that hallway at the very back of this room and outdoor to the outside. We still wear masks in the church, but they're optional outside. We are fortunate this morning to have our own Mike Bernos to sing and play for us. Mike is an accomplished businessman, musician, producer, and writer. He's a singer-songwriter of many genres. He is the founder of and plays with Spice and the Po' Boys and Ample Angst. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you so much. Every time I'm privileged to come play at the UU at Buckman Bridge, I try and write a song because it's a special occasion for me. So I wrote this song, and I wrote it for my son. Your life's ahead of you, my sails are coming down. Same winds behind my back will soon blow for you. No matter what I've heard or seen, places where I've been, you will walk your own path, guided by your dreams. And the rocks and shoals low I fell upon, you will see them too. But I made it through, yes, so will you. you stay your course and follow what's true. Destiny awaits you like the sea to the river true. And the blessings that came my way will surely find you. Keep an open heart to the mystery. When love comes calling, take its hand. And the rocks and shores that await you will be smoother if there's two. Like deja vu, you'll know what to do if you stay your course and follow your dreams.
Thank you so much, Mike. Please remain seated and join with me as we speak the promises we have to each other. Our congregational covenant, which you will find printed on the second page of your order of service. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, to seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and to those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing our call to worship, which is in your order of service. Thank you. Now it is our time for all ages. I have a question for you, and if you want to answer it out loud, that would be great. How long did it take you to get to church this morning? 15 minutes. It was 15 for me. Yeah. I want to tell you a story about some people who traveled 4 days to get to church. These people lived in England about 700 years ago. Back in those days, of course, there were no cars or trucks or trains or anything else. So they had to ride to this particular church on horseback. So they couldn't go to this special church every Sunday. They had their village churches for that. But once a year, or perhaps only once in a lifetime, people in England would go to a town called Canterbury to worship at a beautiful church there called Canterbury Cathedral. There were 30 people in this particular group riding horses to go to Canterbury Cathedral. There was a teacher, there was a lawyer, there was a cook, there was a soldier, 2 nuns, and several other people on this trip to Canterbury. The first night of their trip, they stopped at an inn to eat and sleep. That first night, someone came up with the idea that to entertain each other and keep each other company, each person should tell a story when they had stopped at night and share that story with all the others. That first night, the soldier told a story. The next night, the group stopped at another inn and someone else told a story as they enjoyed their hot meal and got ready for bed. Some of the stories were about great adventures. Some were about love, and some were just plain hilarious and made everybody laugh. At the end of 4 days, they reached the town of Canterbury, and they saw the special, beautiful, sacred church called Canterbury Cathedral. And traveling together had changed them. They had gotten to know each other. They had become friends because they spent those 4 days and nights traveling together. They had gotten to know each other on the trip. How? By listening to each other's stories. All of us in this church, young and old, are on a journey together. Our church is changing. In a few days, Reverend Amy will no longer be our minister. Miss Chris has moved to Texas, far away, and we are grateful to have Jen Jones as our DLRE, and we see her about to tell her story and show us an adventure. We have a new congregational covenant by which we enter into certain agreements with each other. That covenant is new. The world is changing, and so is BBUUC. I wonder, what story do you have to share with us? What do you have to tell us about yourself and about our faith as we travel together toward the future of BBUUC? My story is told. I can't wait to hear yours.
I listen to the wind of my soul. Where I end up, well, I think only God really knows. I sat upon the setting sun, but never, 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 I never wanted water once. No, never, never, never. I listen to my words, but they fall for a blow. I let my music take me where my heart wants to go. I swam upon the devil's lake, but never, 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 I'll never make the same mistake. No, never, never, never.
Mike. Reverend Carmen Emerson is no stranger to this church or this pulpit. She is our affiliated community minister in covenant with this church. Her work as an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister in full fellowship happens within the wider Jacksonville community as the lead chaplain for Baptist Medical Center, Nassau. She's a board-certified chaplain, and her experience as a parish minister includes 10 years of full-time service to Unitarian Universalist congregations. Reverend Carmen will give the sermon a little later, but at this time I invite her to come up because she has a meditation that she will share with us.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, this was really hard in the days when you had mask, earrings, and a lapel mic. It was an awkward moment. So I want to invite you to join me in a time of meditation, which means a time of peace for your spirit. I invite you to just relax your shoulders, relax your back, get your feet on the floor. Take a good deep breath together. You can close your eyes if you'd like to. I'm keeping watch. You'll be safe. What we call a beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We continue in silence.
It is now my privilege to invite you to participate in giving financially for the work of this church. There are multiple ways to give. We do retain the age-old custom of passing the plate. You can also find some fancy modern ways to give if you go to our website, bbuuc.org. We have Donna Zimmerman and Chuck Smithers for our offertory ushers today. If you please would, when they have finished passing the plate and are coming forward, please rise in body or spirit to sing our offertory hymn, Spirit of Life.
By the way, before I put my preacher hat on, I'll leave my chaplain hat on and say, thank you for wearing your masks in this gathered space. It is good to be with you this morning. It was really good to be with you and sing a series of Alleluias with you this morning. And Gary, thanks for the emphasis that you put on those last Alleluias we sang. It was, I guess my heart and soul have been yearning to sing Alleluia with people I love and trust. Sing those words in this sanctuary, and I use that word intentionally, not just to describe this physical space that we share, but to also describe the sacred space and time that we create by choosing to be together in covenant, that is, in promise and in expectation. So I've been reading about expectations and the expectations that we have of ourselves and others during the kinds of macro and micro transitions that we are experiencing now. For example, the Great Resignation. Have you heard of the Great Resignation that's happening right now? So that is happening in the workforce. That's a macro transition, a big level transition. Workers have had 2.5 years of pandemic time working from home. And in that time, they've had some discernment about to what and to whom they are willing to continue to dedicate their time, their energy, their skill, and their knowledge, their life force, as some describe it. And actually, there is a mass exodus. That's actually what is called a mass exodus, or the quiet quitting, because many have discovered that a slower pace of life is actually possible and preferable. An example of a micro transition is the beginning of this new church year at Buckman Bridge. As Elizabeth mentioned in her story, we are welcoming Jen, our new director of Lifespan Religious Education. We simultaneously are saying farewell to Reverend Amy as she concludes her contract ministry with this congregation. We said goodbye to Chris a little bit earlier in the summer. So there are parallel transitions happening all the time, cycles of transitioning happening all the time. Transitions are exhilarating for some. Are you one of those people who loves change? Yeah. They are exhilarating for some. For some of them, they are very unsettling. And that makes sense because the movement of transition is one from orientation to disorientation to reorientation. And that disorientation period has a lot of different names. Some call it chaos. It's been called the wilderness. Some call it the neutral zone. But you get what I'm talking about, moving from orientation, disorientation, the ground is not quite level, and then a reorientation. So during that movement, especially during the disorientation stage, there's often a time of examination and introspection about who we are. And that's because we come to identify ourselves with the circumstances of our lives. And when circumstances change, especially when those changes have been beyond our control, we, as we understand ourselves to be, may have to consider, to explore, to renew our identity. And if we are comfortable with things as they are, comfortable with things as we are probably resistant to change. I think about the identity crises related to transitions. When I meet widows in the hospital, this happens often. Their self-identity has suddenly shifted. They've gone from wife or mother for decades and decades to suddenly they don't know who they are any longer because their spouse has died, and the expectations that they had about that. I hear this so many times, this is not how it was supposed to be. I was supposed to go first, because they never wanted to imagine themselves in that role of the surviving spouse living without the other. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but sometimes, in fact, it is that way. Transitions happen, and clearly communicated expectations can be very, very helpful to us in times of transition. I trust that most of us are aware of the core values within ourselves, that which is the through line, that which is unchangeable, steady, and true, no matter what the circumstances or the expectations arising from those circumstances. And I also trust that most of us have experienced a change in circumstances that necessitated some kind of adjustment in our expectations of ourselves and one another, and in some way impacted and hopefully in time expanded our self-identity. Transitions and the inherent shift in our expectations are a part of life. And our commitment to lean into that rather than away from that is affirmed in the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The word responsible in that principle reminds us that yes, we can and we will have expectations of ourselves and of one another as we create a sustaining religious community together, supporting us as we privately and publicly strive to live our religious values in a world that is badly in need of them. So I've been speaking about individual transitions, but I want to note that congregations also go through times of transitions, navigate that process of orientation, disorientation, reorientation. So the core identity of a congregation is its mission, not its minister, but its mission. And its essential expectations are reflected in its covenant, and both can and will and may be impacted if we are true to our call to be a living faith tradition. You see that on the front of our hymnals every Sunday, right? Singing the living tradition. That means we know things are going to change and we're going to change. So I want to share a story that some of you I know have heard in our one-on-one conversations or in covenant groups. This happened in a congregation that I promise you is not this congregation. A series of unfortunate events in the community triggered a time of discernment by the congregation's leaders. They had to consider the congregation's response to those unfortunate events, what was expected of the congregation by the community, and what did the congregants expect of one another in living our UU values and fulfilling our mission, which included a commitment to intentionally engage in anti-racism work. The congregation's identity was shifting as passive assumptions were replaced by an active, intentional, unflinching examination of ourselves, as well as systemic racism and cultures of white supremacy. That which had been taken for granted, which was, we are good people and we are not racists, so that had been taken for granted, felt like it was under too much scrutiny and critique. Their time of active discernment felt chaotic, created a sense of disorientation and disequilibrium in the congregation. So as I said earlier, change is exhilarating for some and disquieting for others. The movement from orientation to disorientation included for this congregation, moving from self-satisfaction with their existing identity to the possibility that they would need to understand themselves in a new way, could have an evolving identity. That process also included moving from familiar expectations to new expectations, and some also found that very discomforting and disoriented. So one of the founding older members of the congregation came to speak to their minister. He did not like at all the anti-racism conversation. He felt it was unnecessary, redundant, and disruptive. Like many, he was defensive of and critical about references to white supremacy culture because, and here's the thing, and I know this, or the minister he talked to knew this was the thing, he was only hearing, you are a racist. That's all he could hear when people talked about white supremacy culture or anti-racism efforts. All he could hear was somebody saying to him, you are racist. And his identity was, I'm not racist. And I bet every single person in this sanctuary this morning will say, I'm not racist. He couldn't get past that distinction, even though no one had or would ever dream of calling him or anyone else there a racist, or a white supremacist. What we were engaged in is a systemic cultural examination, not a personal critique. And I want to say that again because that is really important in this work. We were engaged in a systemic cultural examination, not a personal critique of any person. But here's the thing, the aha moment came when he said, you know, this is just not the UU that I joined 50 years ago. Transitions challenge our identity, our expectations, our assumptions, and our comfort. This kind man expected things to remain the same. He needed things to remain the same because he understood his identity, his relevance, and his belonging in things as they were and had been for a long time. Does that make sense to you? I need things to say the same because I know who I am and that I belong. And that belonging, that yearning is so important. It's why we find our way into community. What was fascinating about this particular revelation is that the person who said, you know, this is not the UU that I joined 50 years ago, was a direct beneficiary. He and his husband were direct beneficiaries of the intentional, missional, courageous, transitional work of Unitarian Universalism to dismantle systemic oppressions and discriminations against the LGBTQ community. Support and equality that had no doubt discomforted and disrupted the expectations and identities of many Unitarian Universalists who in those early days said, we do not want to be known as the gay church. Or, why must we declare ourselves a welcoming congregation? That's redundant. We are already welcoming. So no, my beloved congregant, we are not the UU we were 50 years ago, and my God, aren't you glad for that? And aren't you glad, can't you be glad that still and always we will be the religious people working to change things for others, the religious people who seek the same kind of freedom, support, and rights that you now have because we took risks of discernment and transition. While we may be discomforted, let us never be dissuaded by transitions in our movement. I want to do a recap. The movement from orientation to disorientation to reorientation is triggered by something that calls us out of settled expectations and comfort zones into a time of discernment. Maybe a clash of personal core values with public policy that we simply cannot abide. It may be an event related to someone we love who needs our steadfast support. It can often be a loss of some kind, and I imagine that there are so many stories of loss that we could name. Every person in this congregation, in this sanctuary this morning, has had a story of some ending, some loss that triggered a time of disorientation and discernment as they figured out how to emerge into a new identity, a new set of circumstances, a new set of expectations. So due to that triggering event, there is an ending of the status quo, that state of orientation and equilibrium that we are accustomed to, and we willingly or unwillingly, after that triggering event, move into a state of disorientation, disequilibrium, discernment, and chaos. So who here would agree with me that living in long-term chaos is physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually exhausting? Well, a sanctuary of UUs agreed on one thing this morning, so that is a good thing. I set you up, I'm sorry. So living that chaos, it's why we need each other, friends, to accompany us in times of chaos, to remind us that we are not alone, to help us through the small things and the big things, and to listen us into what comes next. I want to say that again because I think it is one of the most important things I can say to you as a UU minister. In times of chaos, one of the most loving and faithful things that we can do is listen one another into what comes next. Transformation follows that time of chaos and discernment as we figure out who we are now, how we're going to be in the world now, what parts of our identity we're going to bring forward into now, and what parts we, by necessity of growth, leave in our past. We need a safe place, a safe community in which we can integrate and practice our new identity, our new way of being in the world. And that, friends, is why and how so many people find their way to Unitarian Universalism. I hope we never take that for granted. I hope we will never take being that kind of religious community for granted, and that we will be able to cheerfully say, you know, this is not the UU that I joined 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 or 50 years ago, and mean that in a grateful and mature way. So following the ending, the chaos, the transformation, and the integration comes reorientation, a renewed sense of self and a sense of peace, and it feels wonderful to dwell there for a while in the company of those we love and trust, to both comfort, we love and we trust them to both comfort us and challenge us, should we be tempted to fund our peace with apathy. Growth and peace. Growth and peace, growth and peace. Maybe that is the best outcome, the best cycle we can hope for as we navigate transitional cycles of endings, chaos, new beginnings in our covenantal community. And being clear about expectations along the way will be very helpful. So I mentioned that expectations relate to the responsible part of our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We must wisely remember that behind every set of expectations present in every relationship in this congregation, our relationships in covenant with one another, behind every one of those are the personal stories, the kind lifted up in Elizabeth's Time for All Ages this morning. We have so many stories that inform who we are, what we bring to the party, how we're going to connect and react to things, the expectations that we have of one another and relationships. Our expectations inform the ways we are morally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically capable of responding to the expectations we have of ourselves and those with whom we choose to be in covenant. So, I'm a left-brain person, and I really like examples. So as I close, I want to talk to you a little bit about some examples of expectations. These were created by Reverend Sharon Wiley of UU Chalice Congregation in California. She teaches her so I just offer these to you as food for thought and encourage you to think of your own. Think of this. What do you expect of your church, and what is it that you think your church expects of you? That's the question. In our time of transition, what are the expectations that I have of my church? What are the expectations they have of me? So Sharon names 5 in each of those categories. Here are the 5 that she names. So she teaches her congregations when they come on board, they can expect these 5 things from Chalice. Number 1, expect to keep learning. Number 2, expect to deepen your sense of belonging. Number 3, expect to receive care from your fellow congregants and from your minister. Number 4, expect seasons of discomfort and restlessness. And number 5, expect us to meet the nuts and bolts of membership. In other words, communicating regularly about the life of the congregation in our newsletter, on our website, giving you pledge statements, all those things that help you remember you're a part of something organized and intentional. For what the church can expect of its members, or what members can expect one another, she names those as, number 1, that members will abide by the covenants that they make with one another. Members will abide by the covenants that they make with one another. They will attend services and participate in the life of the congregation. They will share their gifts with the congregation and extension with the community. They'll support the congregation financially as best they can, and that they also will attend the nuts and bolts of membership, meaning you'll make sure the office has your current address and let the minister or board know if you're going to resign your membership. And by the way, I just add this one as a personal thing. If you're in the hospital and hope that your minister will come see you, you have to let them know that you're in the hospital. So I wanted to close with these examples of expectations that congregations and congregants may have of one another, because they are helpful touchstones along the way of transformation and transition. In the midst of endings, discernment, chaos, and new beginnings, these are things we can name to help us build a solid, steady, and stable foundation for this new season of a well-lived life. I hope that these expectations inspire you to consider things that are essential to you as a Unitarian Universalist, comprising this congregation, practicing a living, evolving, transforming, and transformative faith tradition. May the company that we keep here help us endure endings with courage and gratitude, help us face chaos with curiosity and discernment with wisdom, and help us welcome new beginnings with hope, with faith, and with love. May it be so, and may we be so. Amen. And would you please rise? We are going to sing hymn number 121 together. And I want to tell you, if you go ahead and turn to 121, I have a couple things I want to say about this hymn. So one thing is that in verse 3, there's a little bit of a hiccup in the way that we sing verse 3. And so we can go either way, but I'm wondering if we could just agree on the way that we want to sing it so we don't get self-conscious about it. So here's what it says. We'll be a land building up ancient cities, pause, raising up devastations from old. So that raising kind of becomes close together. We'll be a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old. Okay, is that helpful? And here's the next thing. In the refrain, it says, come build a land where sisters and brothers. And I think because we are a welcoming congregation and committed to our LGBTQ community, that what we could sing is, come build a land where people together, anointed by God, may then create peace. And if we mess it up, that's okay, it's new. But come build a land where people together. So if you would rise, and we'll sing all 4 verses of hymn 121. Please remain standing as Molly comes forward to extinguish the chalice and our candles, and I offer you these closing words. Our worship concludes, our service begins. May you find inspiration and support from one another as we continue the cycles of growth and peace in our blessed lives. Be a blessing to one another. Amen.